person for this job, and maybe she could just stay with her other government job, and then we see how it shakes out here with the fire department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin Mouton, live in the trailer park. I just got a couple ideas that might help. You could take them or not. You guys got so much knowledge about this already. You guys said, you never stated, you probably have, but I hope you have. But have you ever sat down actually with the fire department and said, this is what we got, what do you got, this is what we got, put it all on the table, see what we need to take out, see what we can put in, try to come up to that even number, and maybe even something that gives you a little bit of money in your pocket at the end. I don't know if you've ever thought about maybe fundraising. Trucks, the fire trucks are big, red, beautiful trucks. Kids love them. Summer comes out, it's boat town, it's water. Everybody's talking about making a water park. I heard about, Geno's. Maybe you guys can go in the metro or go into a land, invite all the kids over, invite all the families, and let people use the fire hose and spray each other and charge them a fee to come in and let them know it's for the community. Maybe you'll get some revenue in for that. I think that'd be an excellent idea, especially on the hot days. You don't need to do it every day. You can only do it in July and August. And also, if you guys do, these guys, stand-up guys, are walking in the fire first. Nobody wants to cut their pay. But if you do have to cut their pay, nobody even wants to say it. I don't want it to happen. But maybe you guys can all take a pay cut. And I know that's kind of a bad word. But if the township's doing HUD, the township's doing HUD. If you guys got to cut them by 10%, maybe you guys can be good sports about it and cut yours by 10% too. And if everything picks up in the future and you can give them their money back, you can take your money back. And I don't think that's too much to ask for either. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Sunstock, 31698 San Juan. The idea of a committee has been around forever. If you want to bury something, you get a committee. If you want to influence something, you get a committee. If you want to get it the way you want it and get the answer that you want, you get a committee. I don't expect that you're going to get any different answers out of this committee than what you could do on your own up there, just as Mr. York said. The committee's going to be comprised of board members, firefighters, and the fire chief, along with community members with specific expertise in fire operations and accounting, but not from our community. And the committee would also have resident representation. How many people are going to be on this committee? You haven't answered that. Secondly, if in fact you're going to get people from SEMCOG, they're going to want to get paid. I've been in government. I know what dealing with SEMCOG and some of those other places are. They want money. They're not going to come over here and give you freebies on your time or their time without getting some sort of money, or at least establishing something so that the committee recommends that we form another committee. That's what's going to happen. The goal would be for the committee to examine our current operations, look for the ways to reduce costs, examine our service level, and ultimately offer recommendations to the Board of Trustees. So they offer you the recommendations. You have no authority to do anything with them. The only authority you have is the ability to lay off or not hire. That's it. Everything else is contractually bound. You've been dealing with the contractually bound part of it with the fire department for, what was it, a year? And you ended up in arbitration? And now you're going to appoint the same members, the fire department, the fire chief. You're going to appoint them to the committee that's going to come in and make a recommendation to you? That's baloney. If you're looking for somebody to make some recommendations, you get some community members and have them come in. Somebody that doesn't have a whole lot of interest, other than the fact they get paid, they have to pay all the bills, to come in and start looking at the fire department. We could get rid of the secretary, we could take a look at how the lawn cutting is done, we could take a look at whether or not we really need all of these firefighters to be water certified. Do we really need an ambulance service? Every other community in this whole area uses a pay-for-hire ambulance service, MedStar. But Harrison Township has to have one. And of course, when you have to have one, that drives things like, oh, we have to have an ambulance. You heard the guy from AT&T say, well, when you invest $250,000 in an ambulance that you only allow 6, 7, 10 years on, right off the bat, you got a $25,000 cost per year. Instead of being $25,000, you make those fire trucks last 25 years. Or 30, like they do down in Detroit. 30 into 225 now is only about $8,000 or $9,000. I mean, you guys aren't looking at the right things. Your chief should be making these recommendations. He should be the one that's proposing everything. But he's going to sit on this committee and do nothing. He's sitting here backing up the idea of having a secretary come in. You got a chance to save over $50,000 right off the bat. What you do right now, right off the bat, over $50,000. I'm curious to see what happens at the next time.
Mr. Zensnak, the timer went off.
Yeah, I heard the timer, and some of the things I have to say need to be said. The fact of the matter is, this is a cover for you.
We ask 3 minutes, and I've tried to allow you to go beyond that time. I'm asking you to wrap up your comments.
If you wouldn't stop interrupting me, I would.
I've asked you probably 2 minutes after the 3-minute timer went off.
You don't want to hear what I got to say, Ken, that's fine. But the fact is, you are not going to have a committee come out and make a recommendation to the board that we need a tax increase, and then you're going to couch it under the fact that, oh, the committee did it. It ain't going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. I'll do my best to answer the questions some of the residents asked. One question was whether we would be postponing hiring the secretary. I'd said at the last meeting I thought it was a mistake not to replace the clerical person. It is budgeted. I think it is an essential part of the fire operation, so I did put it back on the agenda, and I certainly expect to bring it up after this item. Pending retirements. One of the things that we know is that there are retirements that will result in some tiered savings. One of the things that we did get in the arbitration was tiered benefits. So the new hires are going to have a different set of benefits and a different set of requirements for retirement. There's no retiree health care for new hires. So there are definitely some savings that'll come when those retirements come. The problem is we do have a handful of years before we get there. That's part of the analysis I think that we need to do. One of the questions was, did you sit with the firefighters? Gosh, if we sat with the firefighters once, we probably sat with the firefighters 50 times. We went through negotiations for the better part of a year. We never received an economic proposal from the firefighters. We said our greatest problem with the budget, with the firefighters, is the fact that we have a deficit. We proposed different ideas to solve that problem. We never received one proposal from the firefighters. Fundraising is not going to close a $200,000 deficit. Cut their pay. We cannot. It's not within our rights. By law, firefighters are protected by Act 312. It's a binding arbitration. They cannot strike, which makes sense. You certainly don't want public safety personnel going on strike. But in exchange for not having the ability to strike, if management and the union cannot come to agreement, they both go to a third party, an arbitrator. That arbitrator listens to both sides and then comes out with a decision. We've gone through that process. So cutting anybody's pay, that is not an option to close this gap. Another resident comment about forming a committee and having people not from this community. I may not have made myself clear. I certainly support the idea of having people from our community. What I said was I don't think residency is what we're looking for. We're looking for expertise. We're looking for someone who may have seen something done differently in another community, who may look at our contract, our level of service, the ambulance issues, or any of another number of issues, and give genuine suggestions to say, you know, in comparison to some other communities, you guys are really lean, or you're really, you know, heavy in a certain area. The question was asked, how many? I don't know. I certainly don't want to say to the chief that he wouldn't be a part of it. I think there should be representation from board members on the committee. Firefighters certainly deserve a seat at that to share their thoughts. I mean, we certainly don't want to do this in a vacuum. But I really can't say at this point what interest there is in our community as a whole. And by community, I guess I'll say southeastern Michigan. I'm hopeful that we can find some folks. SEMCOG, no freebies from SEMCOG. I can't think of a time when we pay a membership annually. I can't think of a time we've been charged for the services that they provide us. Another comment was made, it's layoffs or nothing. Well, certainly if I were to talk to the firefighter solution to this problem, if I were to try to represent them at this table, isn't layoffs or nothing. The firefighters have pointed out that as the property values have dropped, as taxable value has dropped, the average citizen, where they may have been paying $500 for fire protection, they might only be paying $375 for fire protection. I don't know those numbers, but based on the reduction in property values rather rapidly, and proposal A putting a cap on what they grow back at, firefighters say, raise the millage rate. That's their proposal. So I can't say that that's not an option. I'm not saying that it's the best option or the worst option, but I couldn't sit here and say that the solution to the problem is layoffs or nothing. That's, to me, one of the options that we have to look at. Ultimately, this board doesn't have the authority to put that millage into place. We have the opportunity through the election process to let people choose on their own. And I'm not afraid of that process. I like that process. I think this whole argument about Proposal 1, I'm much happier that the folks in our state House and Senate are giving us the opportunity to vote, which is constitutionally required for a sales tax increase. But I'd much rather have a situation where I get to decide at the ballot box and someone doesn't impose on me. A recommendation from this could be to take a look at the millage rate. I don't know that yet. But I think we have to be mindful that that's one of the options, and if it is, it means the voters have a chance to choose for themselves what level of service they would like to pay for, or how much they would like to pay. So I do think there are other options, and there are other things that this committee could provide. Other board comment?
I don't even know if you need to bring the people back. Just go ahead and start the committee and start moving. I agree with Mr.
Yeah, I wouldn't
But
do
go
that.
ahead and start moving ahead. I mean, I've already said that I don't want anything to do with this committee.
I think fortunately we've done a lot of
I
the
mean-
homework as part of the arbitration process, so they'll have a head start as
We have a
opposed to
lot of
cold
data.
start.
Yep.
A lot of data.
Right. I do think, though, that some of that data was constructed, arbitration, whether we like it or not, the arbitration process is kind of a battle that you go through. You've got one position. Clearly, you wouldn't be in arbitration if you didn't have opposing positions. So we spent the better part of a year in a battle. It's my hope that through this process, we can have a more open process and, maybe it won't be an adversarial process. I'm hoping to bring that attitude. We'll see if other parties want to bring that, but I'd like it to be open, and there's nothing off the table. It doesn't excite me as a supervisor and as a board member to talk about the potential for a millage vote, but I certainly can't ignore it if it's an opportunity, if it's a possibility, if it's something that could come from this.
Look, I said this before about this millage. 3 years ago, we sat at this table. We talked about Prop A. We talked about the trough. We talked about the values going down. 4 board members went to the public. They sat at this table and said, we just need $500,000 to get us through the rough spot for the next 3 years, and then we're good to go. I'm not happy about this talk about millage at all. And I voted no, and Mr. Verkest and Mr. Witt voted no at that point, for different reasons. We had different reasons for that. I thought we should have started controlling our costs 4 years ago, which we could have. We chose not to do that. The board chose not to do that. Your only option, you lose the $500,000. You're not 200,000 in the hole. You're going to be $700,000 in the hole. That's a fact.
Actually,
That-
the
that-
millage, the total operating millage and the half mill expire at the same time, so there's no millage.
But
once
I
they
guess my
expire.
point is that we're backs up against the wall like big time right now. And when your back gets up against the wall, unfortunately, you start making, sometimes you make dumb decisions. When-
Which is exactly
You know.
why I think we need to take a look at this, in a more structured light. We don't want to make, this is, as I've said earlier, there's no more important decision we're going to make than this. And I think we owe it to the residents that when we put forth a proposal, it's been done with a proper input so that we can make recommendations that have their public safety in mind as well as the safety of the men and women of the fire department and recognizing the financial implications of that. And I don't think it's an easy answer. I don't think it's something that the board can sit here and say, we know exactly what to do and we can do it tonight. I really don't. I don't think at this point I'd be comfortable with doing that.
All right, well, we've had a lot of discussion back and forth, unless there's any new thoughts.
One thing to mention, one of the residents did mention, we do get together every year with the fire department and we with the chief and with the budget and sit down and go through all the numbers, just for the record. That happens at least once a year.
Okay. We have a motion by Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. Brado to approve the formation of a Fire Services Assessment Committee for the purpose of reviewing the operations, budget, and service levels of our fire department and making recommendations to the Board of Trustees. Members will be recruited and appointed by the Board of Trustees at a later date. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda was originally labeled as item E2. Board members, we have interviewed several candidates for the department secretary position at Fire Station Number 2. The recommendation is based on interviews as well as background and reference checks. There were several good candidates, but we have chosen Ms. Megan Brown as the recommended hire for the position. All of her references were overwhelmingly positive. At this time, board members, I would entertain a motion to hire Ms. Megan Brown.
Supervisor, I have a question. What is the fully loaded price, annual price for this position?
Isn't it about 60,000, Glenn?
When I'm doing calculations for the budget for the firefighters, the benefits are 100% of salary for
This
all the rest of the employees in the township. Benefits are 50% of salary.
Well, if you have a 40,000 salary, what do we pay, about 15,000 for healthcare, so that's
It's,
Well,
if you do 15,
55,000
if
right
you do
there, plus a
50%,
40% kick on the.
it's 56,771. If Mr. Spencer said do 50%.
But it's gonna be a lot more than that, because you're 38,000, plus 15,000 for healthcare, which is what, 38, 40, so you're now at $53,000. Then you have a, 40% kick on the pension side of that, on the salary? So you're gonna add another 15,000 for a pension contribution on top of that, so you're probably 65,000 on
Yeah.
a fully loaded.
So a couple of thoughts on that. Not every employee gets full family coverage, so the $15,000 number for healthcare is not an accurate one. Second of all, this position has been open, so while we've budgeted for this position to be filled in the township, it has been open. And there's roughly about a 5-month period before the person is really even a full-fledged employee. So there's a probationary period,
And for the
90
purposes
days.
of this year, there's also 90 additional days from the day they get hired where they don't receive health care benefits.
Correct, right, so the cost for this year for this position is substantially less than a fully loaded cost, but I would tend to echo Mr. Spencer's comments about a 50%,
Okay, so about $60,000.
yeah, plus or minus, depending on whether the person has single, family, coverage, that sort of thing.
So just a question I had, has there been any thought given to, bringing this person in as either part-time or as a contractor? I mean, if we really need that service performed in the fire department, I'm not saying if you really need it, are there options we can look at rather than hiring a full-time person at this time?
Well,
We have
yep,
a
so,
floater.
yep, so there's a couple of things there. One would be, we certainly have for a temporary period of time, had part-time help as opposed, or I should say, temporary help, not necessarily part-time. So for example, if someone's on leave, say a medical leave, we have that option. Now, this is due to a retirement. There would be some point where we would be probably stretching our rights in the contract, but in a short-term sense, we could do that. What I'd propose to you is that hiring this person because of a 5-month probationary period really is, in essence, kind of hiring a temporary or part-time person
For this year.
for this year.
Then after that,
Right. But realistically, the point, to answer your question, long-term, I can't have someone in here that's a part-time person. Within the contract, I think we would be prohibited from filling this position. The options would be to fill the position or not fill the position. It is a bargaining unit position, even if it is a part-time position, it's a bargaining unit position. But that would require negotiations.
thank you.
I have a question for Chief Lopez, and I believe I already know the answer to this, but perhaps he could enlighten the residents and the rest of the board. I went and met with the firefighters and discussed this position with a few of the guys. And what I wanted to ask the chief was, does this person support just the chief, or does this person support the entire department?
Chief?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Brado. I think, it's a great question, and I think it's important that everyone understands that it by no means is the fire chief's secretary. It's the fire department secretary, and, it actually, it speaks to the bigger issue of the previous agenda item of the concept of looking at the fire department in terms of the service that it provides as an organization in its entirety to the community. And to Mr. Batante's point, I think that there's no greater function of government than its public safety and also being good financial stewards. And I think that we focus on the latter a great deal at these meetings, but I think it's also important to look at the former, and that is the service that we provide to the residents. Because there's 25,000 people who aren't here tonight who have an expectation that there's a fire department there with an ability to respond to their emergencies, and that when they call the business line of the fire department, there's someone there to answer that phone, to answer their question, to direct them, to give them copies of reports, as well as the firefighters. Again, we talk about how this department runs very lean. We may not like the cost of labor, but we can't argue the numbers of personnel that we have in relation to other departments and what they do with those small numbers. And in order to do that, without 40-hour fire marshals, without 40-hour training officers, without 40-hour EMS coordinators, they take on that work, but it requires administrative support because they're doing that as well as their normal firefighting functions, as well as going out and doing fire inspections. So that position, contrary to popular belief, you can ask Ms. Gemmel, I don't think I ever asked her to type an email or a letter for me. I'm pretty self-sufficient. On the contrary, she worked independently on behalf of the department, serving the community, and also assisting the firefighters as their administrative support for all the things that they do so that we don't have to have 40-hour personnel in those positions. So it's part of a greater concept, and I think this committee is going to look at and recognize that what this department does for the community in terms of its numbers is, a great service. And again, we could argue the cost of labor, and we spent the last year, and I think we're all very intimately familiar with that part of the equation.
Right.
But we also have to recognize that that's a short-term issue because of the seniority of the department. And what that arbitration ruling did give us is long-term answers. And we're looking at an issue of getting over the hump to get to those long-term answers. And I don't think that sacrificing the good that this department does for the community for the short term is a proper or prudent response for what this community deserves for fire protection. And the administrative assistant or department secretary now, because we lowered that classification to save money, eliminating that and the cuts in service that means to the firefighters in supporting them and to the community, I don't think it's a prudent decision.
Well, I have a question then. How am I supposed to pay for it? That's really my only question, and I've said that all along. And I'd hire 10 people. All I want to know is, we know we're going to run out of money in November. We know that. That's a fact if we do nothing. I have $60,000 of savings here that doesn't directly impact public safety. Because I'll tell you right now, I'm going to vote all day long to keep a fireman over an administrative assistant. That I will vote 100% every day, 365 days a week. That's going to be my vote. All I'm asking, and all we asked last time was, how are we paying for it? And if anybody can come up with the answer to that, we're good.
I think we
And I
appointed
don't know
a
how this
committee.
board's gonna, I don't know how this board's gonna vote.
I think if we
But
look
I
at.
don't, but I don't understand,
Sorry.
what I certainly won't understand is, if you vote for this person, why are you keep perpetuating the problem? That's how we got into this problem in the first place. Because oh, it's only 10,000, oh, it's only 20,000, oh, it's only 50,000, oh, it's 100,000. Next thing you know, we're deficit $400,000 a year, we blow $2 million. And we're sitting here, I don't understand the logic. And if we need somebody over there, and I mentioned it to you, I said I was more than happy to help you. I'm more than happy to have my staff help you. We have a floater position that this board has, that person's job is to float to wherever we need to until this budget situation, which everybody seems to think is short-term, that's great. Get over the short-term hump, move along. Maybe we hire someone in 2 months. I don't know. But I just don't see how it's responsible to hire somebody right now when you have the deficit. And certainly don't say that it's a public safety issue that we don't have somebody over there, because we certainly can Mr. Forlaney, prior to, 40506, he was actually looking at making that job half-time with the senior center. Now, I don't know, like I said, I've said this before, I don't know what that person does all day long, never looked into it. I'm just going on, previous discussions in the board.
So you don't know what that position does, but you feel so confident that we don't need him, but we can throw things at it and make it happen. But you have no idea what it does.
No, what I said was.
You said, "I don't know what that person
The
does."
previous supervisor.
No, you said, I don't know what that
Previous
position
supervisor,
does.
and you were his deputy, was floating out a plan, and he was pushing it, that job was only half-time.
Did he
So-
execute on that plan?
So I have to assume that as the supervisor of that department, there had to be some truth to that, and this chief wasn't here. It was Chief Seitz. Maybe they were doing things differently back then. But what I can say is, like I said, we have to get the ambulance stuff done, and we have to get the payroll stuff done. And we have a floater position, and I think that in the short term, 2-3 days a week, I'm sure that we can send that floater position over there.
Yeah, I can tell you that floater person probably wouldn't be available for a month because of that. They are functioning as a floater to help with the election. So just so you know
That's
what's
fine.
going on with that.
I mean, the board has a vote,
Right, and,
You know
and,
what
and
I
the
want?
other thing is that we sit here today, and each of us have a preconceived notion of how much this position is needed. And so we've all had discussion on saying, well, we need this position, we don't need this position, it's a critical function, we can do without it, how am I gonna pay for it? This is exactly what this committee is looking at. So, for example, when we look at other communities our size, have they figured out a way to operate without clerical staff? I would love to find that out. If there's something we're doing wrong, let's look at that. But right now, our structure, the way that department is structured, it is dependent on clerical help. If we go through this committee, and the committee says, wow, you guys are nuts, you don't know this, but you can eliminate the clerical position. We can lay the position off. likely the person wouldn't even have, standing in the union by that time. I mean, this is
Or
a.
they could be
it's a-
transferred to another area.
Sure, or we may find that the employee doesn't do as well in performance as they may have in the interview. Obviously, we wouldn't make the recommendation if we anticipated that, but certainly there have been times when we've terminated someone's employment during the probationary period. The point is that right now, I don't have a proposal to provide the services to the chief that he needs. It's not in a floating position, it's not in a part-time position. Long-term, there's costs associated with this. If we determine 6 months from now, a year from now, that we can eliminate the clerical position, we have that ability to lay off. But I don't think it's prudent to say to the chief, we don't really know if you need it or not, you say you do, and we just sat here talking about how we gotta trust the chief and go to him for operations. Chief comes to us and says, I could really use that clerical position, it's creating a lot of trouble. Nah, we're not gonna staff that. The primary costs in the fire department are not for one clerical position. If we find through this process that we can eliminate the position, we can certainly take a look at that, and this board has that opportunity to do that. But right now, if it hadn't been for the retirement of a long-term person, we certainly wouldn't be suggesting that we're gonna lay off the person that's in that position to try to save money. The question comes down to whether or not and some of you have said you've contacted the chief or asked him questions. Is this person necessary? We've asked him in these meetings. I've observed it. I'm confident it is a position that needs to be filled. I've put it on the agenda twice now. If we want to change our mind in the future, making the decision this evening doesn't preclude us from doing that. But even if we make this hire right now, the person's likely to give a minimum 2-week notice to their other employer. They're likely to come in and take a certain amount of time learning some of the operations and procedures before they're even effective in that position. I just don't know how much longer I delay this staffing for the chief.
I would never hire somebody with the idea that I'm gonna lay them off. I've never hired somebody like that. I don't think it's fair to the applicant and.
I don't think we'd have to.
And to just leave that sort of open like that where, you know, we have a budget deficit and to just say, oh, you know, we can just lay her off. Yeah, we always have that.
Yeah, I
right?
haven't said that.
But-
What I've
but
said is
then-
that we're not precluded
but-
from doing that in the
Well, I
future.
understand that, but I'm not hiring somebody to lay them off. I think that this applicant would work out. I interviewed, I sat there with you and interviewed her, and I think that the applicant is quite qualified. It's just simply a money issue.
Yeah, I don't think,
know.
I think we're setting up a committee to look at operations, and that's part of, this is included in part of that. But until we decide on something that eliminates the need for clerical position, we need a clerical person to continue to operate. That was sort of the gist of the last motion, is we're gonna try and get to a point where we can make an educated decision and know what those changes actually are, but it's not, getting the department to there doesn't include not fulfilling our obligations for 6 more months, so.
And didn't we say last time, at the last meeting, that there are gonna be some retirements? So if the committee comes back and says, you know, we don't need this person, we could always transfer this person to another department because there's probably gonna be a retirement or two.
If that comes up, yeah.
Yeah.
and,
Yep. Well,
There is one more side to this situation is, if you decide not to hire this administrative assistant, now you have people that are making more money
Right.
than that person doing that job, which makes them, one, less effective at the job they're supposed to do, two, inefficient at the job they've now been asked to do for a higher cost overall than we expected. So to say that you can have people do their own things, yeah, one of the residents brings that up all the time, but that came up in my business too. But it became more inefficient for our company to do business, and things started dropping off the table that used to get done, that no longer get done because those people don't have time to do it. Because they're doing other tasks that they never had the chance or time to do. So I don't think it's necessarily prudent to say that we're gonna make the more expensive people do that task for that amount of money.
In my opinion, if we're gonna short staff a department, it's not gonna be the guys that are responding to strokes and heart attacks. It's gonna be
right.
some
Well,
other department.
And that's part of it is if we say, hey, firefighter, you have to do that, guess what? I mean, there's a certain aspect of that job that's high stress. I don't want the guy to come back from a run and have to do paperwork and be concerned about, I mean, it's trying to balance all these competing things, and this is how we operate the department. And we need to continue that until we say, we're gonna structure the department differently. And we haven't said that yet. We haven't made that decision. If and when we make that decision, we can change whether this person works here or not.
Well, you know, we've discussed it 2 meetings in a row. And we've discussed it a fair amount here this evening without a motion. So I'm just gonna ask, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to hire Ms. Megan Brown to fill the position of Department Secretary of the Fire Department, subject to a physical drug test and 90-day probationary period with a starting salary of $37,847.72, plus benefits.
Is there a second?
Support.
All right, good. Now, I know this board's had a fair amount of discussion, and I certainly would leave it open for discussion, but if there's no objection, I'll open the floor for public comment.
William Bardell, 18-year resident. What I want to know is, this secretary for 60,000 full boat, is she going to be doing the term papers for the fire department? I'm not seeing it, and I think it's very incongruent to hire this lady. I'm sure she's a fine person, and she can stay with her whatever government job she has right now, and have a floater after the election, and because all this stuff was supposed to be whittled down for the last 3 years, and we keep shooting ourselves in the foot over and over again, and again, I'd like to know, is this secretary going to be doing term papers for the firemen's upgrading classes? I'm just not seeing it. I mean, money in, money out, I don't see it. Please, somebody.
Thank you.
Jim Sunstock, 31698 San Juan. I sat here and listened to you, just this previous item on the agenda, appoint a committee that you don't have any idea who's gonna be on it, or how long it's gonna take, or whatever, or really what it's gonna do, and you're short $200,000 by your own admission, and you got $60,000 on the table for a position that you have not justified one way or another, other than the chief says, I need it. All of a sudden now he says, oh, I need it because they're not answering my phone. I mean, just because I accused him of answering his phone last time, so now he's got to come up and say, no, they don't answer my phone? Baloney. They answer his phone. They do his typing for him. They do a lot of things for him. You're going to hire this lady, you're going to make her walk away from a job in another community where she's making money, and you're going to hire her with the intent that, hey, well, you know what, so what? If our committee says that we don't need it, so what? We can get rid of her. I heard that at least several times up there. Our firefighters do 2 main functions. 2. They either fight fires or they go on ambulance runs. Either one of those would take priority over any other issue that would come in front of the administrative secretary or the firefighters if they were required to do whatever kind of job she does. In other words, if they're filling out paperwork and that buzzer goes off, guess what? They all run out there and jump in the fire truck and go, and they leave it sit there. And they come back. When they get back, they can finish it up. Now the question I have for you is, what do they do during the time when they're not fighting fires or not fighting or helping people out with the ambulance run? What do they do? Well, geez, I think they got a big screen TV over there. They got a couple, at least 3 or 4 Barco loungers. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's only 2. I don't know. They got, I don't pay them to sit there and relax. If there's work that needs to be done, typing that needs to be done, they all have computers, by the way. They all have them. So if there's any work that has to be done, they do it. And they do it in non-essential times. To sit there and say that they're gonna ignore firefighting duties or ambulance duties is unbelievable, and I can't even believe I heard supposedly intelligent people say that up here on this board. I can't believe it. It's not your money, is it? Who cares? If you hire this woman, this committee is a farce on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Board members,
Said all I've had to say.
I feel the same way.
I mean,
Hearing no other discussion, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Capperell to hire Miss Megan Brown for the position of Department Secretary for the Fire Department at the contract rate of $18.20 per hour with benefits, subject to the completion of a successful 90-day probationary period. All those in favor?
do a roll call, please.
Okay. Mr. Witt?
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Capperell?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Tominelli?
Yes.
Mr. York?
No.
Mr. Verkast?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you, board members.
Yep, thank you, Chief. Next on our agenda, item E3, regarding our OPEB accounts. Mr. Spencer has reported that we ended 2014 with a slight surplus of approximately $50,000 in the general fund. Certainly, we're discussing various funds here. I guess it's worth noting. We have a fire fund, we have a water and sewer fund, and we have a general fund. Those are our three primary funds. There are also other smaller funds, but those are the big three. The general fund had a surplus of $50,000. During the preparation of the 2014 budget, we eliminated the funding for the retiree health care, even though we have been able to contribute approximately 10% of wages during the past 3 years. I asked Mr. Spencer to tabulate the 2014 wages for general and the water and sewer employees. We have a trust for these funds, and they are invested similar to our pension funds. Money that is invested generates an interest rate, I guess, kind of similar to the way we might invest our retirement funds, the pension funds and so forth, mutual funds and the like. Well, interest rates for general fund dollars sitting in the bank are, I don't know if they're zero or next to zero or a negative.
Pretty close.
Yep.
I heard they're gonna have to pay to put money in.
Right, right. Our general fund balance at the end of 2014 was $2,776,420. The salaries for the general fund was 1.1 million, and water and sewer employees was 711,000. So if we were to contribute that amount of approximately 10% into a savings account that would provide for retiree health care in the future, that number would be approximately 185,000. I just rounded it off. So I have suggested that we contribute 185, which is equal to 115,000 from general fund, 70,000 from water and sewer, to our retiree health care trust for calendar year 2014.
Supervisor, I'll make that motion.
All right, we got a motion by Mr. Tominello. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Batanti. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on the agenda was originally labeled item E4. Board members, recently the Board of Trustees approved 2 collective bargaining agreements, which included raises for the clerical, the field employees, and supervisory employees. We also have several part-time employees, and it has been almost 3 years since their last raise. I'm proposing a 50-cent per hour raise, as shown in the chart below. The cost of that raise is $4,000. I noted not including the first 3 positions. So when we look at this chart, the water and sewer maintenance worker and then the 2 clerical positions that follow that are temporary positions in the event that someone goes on some form of a leave. So we basically have a field worker for the water and sewer department, and we have a basic clerical and an advanced clerical. So if one of our water and sewer personnel is on some extended leave and it's necessary to backfill them with someone, those are the rates, but they're not budgeted. Anytime that does occur, we realize savings. So if someone goes on some extended leave, and they stop, accruing benefits, and we backfill them with one of these positions, these rates are lower than what the contracted rates are for our employees. So those first three positions are not budgeted, but it doesn't have an impact on our budget, because anytime that occurs, there's a savings. But the bus driver, the ground maintenance workers, and the supervisor for the grounds maintenance, workers, would each realize about 50 cents an hour. During the discussions, we also realized that the cable operator is one of the positions that isn't in our policy. As a modification to this suggested motion, I would propose that we would add the cable operator to the policy and place them at the same level as the bus driver or the parks and grounds maintenance worker. So of those positions, the amount of hours that were worked last year, if we were to give that 50-cent raise, the annual cost of that raise spread across maybe,
Well, if it's $100, I'd be surprised.
well, I'm
in
saying,
that department.
no, I
Across
mean,
the board.
the total
Oh,
cost
oh.
across maybe, I'm gonna just guess, maybe 8 to 10 employees would be about $4,000. Just seems reasonable. We've negotiated contracts. These are non-union positions, but the fact that they're non-union doesn't mean that we should not consider them when we're working with the other employees. Discussion, board members? Or is there a motion?
Mr. Supervisor, I have to make a motion to revise policy number 2.15 regarding part-time, temporary, emergency, and seasonal employees by increasing the hourly rate by 50 cents. Is it still 6 positions?
Well,
So putting the cable.
those 6
operator-
positions that are listed,
6
look,
positions.
you could say for 7 positions. I said for 6, and then at the end, add cable operator to the policy.
For the 6 positions listed above, in addition to the cable operator.
Yep. And so you have to add the
Water-
cable. Yep.
For water, sewer maintenance worker, data entry, basic clerical, advanced clerical office position, smart bus driver, parks and grounds maintenance worker, parks and grounds maintenance supervisor, and the cable operator.
And adding the cable operator at the $11.50 per hour rate.
Yes, 11.50 per hour rate effective next pay period.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Batanti. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Brado. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. The next is item E6. Board members, the Downtown Development Authority has met twice, March 31st and again on April 9th. They reviewed the development plan as well as considered bylaws for their governance. As of the submission of this agenda request, they have not held their April 19th meeting. Since then, they have in fact met. And they have a development plan and a set of bylaws for recommendation to the Board of Trustees. The issue before us is, let's see here. I have some other notes. First, for the first 2 meetings, they have not been able to establish any of the positions for chair, vice chair, because they don't have bylaws to operate under. So they discussed them at the first meeting, adopted them officially at the second meeting, and those were distributed as soon as those were completed. Since that time, a review from the board members resulted in a couple of proposed changes to the bylaws. So I'll read through those right now. And one step is, and I think the first step that the board is asked to do tonight, is to adopt the Downtown Development Authority bylaws. In the bylaws, under Article 1, Section 2, there was a sentence saying, "The secretary and treasurer do not need to be a member of the board to serve in this office." In conjunction with some other changes, it was proposed that we strike that sentence. Excuse me, further in the bylaws, In Articles 7 and 8, there are some proposed changes. The literal changes are as follows. For Article 7, it was called minutes. It's proposed to revise that to minutes and records. The original language said, "The Board of Directors shall keep a set of minutes of all regular and adjourned meetings and special meetings where official business was transacted. These minutes shall become a public record and shall be filed with the township clerk." The proposed, additional language is as follows. "The township clerk or their designee shall have the responsibility of recording and drafting all minutes, as well as maintaining all records of the authority pursuant to state law." And then there's a second revision, Article 8, and then I'll explain what the purpose of this was. Article 8 used to be, it is contracts, loans, checks, and deposits, and it had a section 1 and 2. The proposal is to strike the existing language and replace it with, "The township shall provide all accounting and treasury services for the authority, including but not limited to the deposit of all funds as well as the issuance of all payments." Now, an explanation for what the logic behind those revisions were. The township has several other boards that are a part of township government. All of them follow a similar process, where our accounting department keeps track of the accounts. When there's a check to be cut, we have policies, we have safeguards in place, the two-signature process, an approval process. And likewise, there's a process that we follow for keeping track of minutes and records. One of the things that was discussed when we discussed the formation of a DDA was that when we look at the example of a DDA in other communities, there are examples where the DDA goes rogue, so to speak. The DDA starts to function on its own, and some of the answers that we received were, well, if that happens, every year you get 2 new appointments, so after 4 years, you'll have 8 new people if they're all crazy, or if the board and the DDA can't agree. The bottom line is the Board of Trustees is elected by the people. The DDA is a board, not unlike Planning Commission or Zoning Board of Appeals. It's a separate subset of local government. But ultimately, we are the ones accountable to the voters. So the structure that we've set into place with all of our other commissions is that the clerk's office provides certain services, certain accounting services. The treasurer's office provides certain services.
Finance.
Right, yeah, well, and I was saying, yeah, through
More
accounting.
him
Yep.
than me.
Right, well, it's really through the clerk's
Yeah,
office, is
yeah,
all I meant. But the point is that, you know, we don't want a scenario where this board, number one, has some level of autonomy different than the other boards. But number two, we want to be accountable for those checks. So do we want a scenario where the DDA says, well, we're going to use this accounting process, and we're somehow subject to review by the public because this body is acting independent of what our policies are. So we have some pretty clear guidelines in place. We're not proposing that the DDA changes any of their responsibilities and their core functions. We're merely saying, we'll keep track of the minutes, and we keep track, you know, and as the checks are cut, we have a process we follow for cutting checks. We do it for the library, we do it for, you know, a lot of other groups. So that was the idea, or the proposal changed. The proposed changes, I'm sorry. Otherwise, bylaws as presented, we think are good. We did reach out to the planner to say, you know, is this a model that works? We looked at the actual state act. I think it's number 197 of 1975, and we can't see a conflict or a problem with this change.
Supervisor, are you looking for a motion?
Yeah,
Make a motion to adopt the Downtown Development Authority Development Plan and
well,
tag-
Nope.
just the
Okay,
bylaws
just
at this
the-
point.
Just the bylaws, okay.
Yep, as amended. The
So,
bylaws as
motion
amended.
to adopt the Downtown Development Authority Development
Nope,
Plan,
just bylaws, only
Okay.
bylaws. Just,
DDA bylaws as amended.
correct. Yep, thank you. Motion by Mr. Tominello, with support by, was that Mr. Brado?
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so Article 9, Section 2, says that they may temporarily adopt a budget in connection with the operation of improvements that have been financed by revenue bonds. I thought that we had a provision in the ordinance that said no revenue bonds.
No, I don't think
No.
so.
So, I
We
guess
said they
in
had to be approved by the board.
Right.
I guess in conjunction with what Mr. York is saying, we went to great lengths, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting.
No, go right ahead.
We went to
No,
great
fine.
lengths to put in some parameters. And in our, you know, in section 8 of our ordinance, we went to great lengths to call out things that this board shall not have the power to do.
Correct.
Right? And so, sort of in line with what you're saying, Mr. York, in section 4, we say the board may exercise all powers provided as amended or otherwise by law, including those bestowed. And I wonder if, and I think it gets to your same point, Mr. York, is there some way to amend this section? I guess if it's semantics, powers bestowed by ordinance, couldn't we say something that identifies the fact that somehow recognizes, instead of saying powers bestowed, we say something like, the board may exercise powers provided by the act as, or otherwise, I don't know if it's amended. I want to draw attention to section 8, which does not give this board authority to borrow money.
No, that's not, yeah, so section 8C says the authority shall not borrow money or issue its revenue bonds or notes to finance all or part of the cost of acquiring or constructing property in connection with the implementation of a development plan in the downtown district, or to refund in advance bonds or notes, comma, unless specifically approved by the township board.
And I agree
Right?
with you.
So
Mr.
the point is
Supervisor.
that it isn't to say that there's no circumstances under which the authority could ever issue bonds. The authority cannot issue the bonds without the approval and authority of this board.
And so all I'm saying is, is there some better way to reference their powers in section 4? And I think
Where's
that
section
addresses
4? What, I'm sorry.
Page 1
Page
of the
1.
bylaws. And I think, that,
Oh,
Mr.
that
York, I'm not
section. I
trying.
was looking at Article 4 going.
I-
Are you
I
talking about
apologize.
management?
No, section four.
Page 1,
Article
section
1.
4.
Article 1, section-
Article 1, section.
And
Oh,
I-
okay, I missed the article one, I'm sorry.
And I apologize, and I was,
Section
and Mr. York, I'm
four.
thinking that speaks to the same point you're making.
I would think that
apologize.
the second part of that clause, including those bestowed establishing, you know, I mean, it references the ordinance pretty clearly in there.
And if that's the case,
And I'd probably defer to Mr. Huth on that as
I
a
guess
contract. but-
bestowed. But, you know what I'm saying?
Uh-oh,
Yeah,
uh-oh.
the computer's having an issue there.
Going a little crazy back there, huh?
Yeah.
I was curious if Glenn was like calling his shot or something.
Yeah, he was lining up the home run. So, Mr. Huth, do you see that as
I followed the point, but as I sit here, it makes sense to me, and I haven't thought of anything that makes more sense, so.
section, you mean,
We're at Article 1, Section 4, right?
right,
Yeah.
yeah, the board has the authority provided by the act as well as the ordinance, is pretty much what it says.
Okay. And I don't mean to, Mr. York may still have another point regarding that.
Keep in mind, we can amend these bylaws as we move forward, so if striking that last sentence of Article 9, Section 2 brings, a perceived layer of, comfort, I don't have a problem with that. I can't see where you need to temporarily adopt a budget without a chance. Oh, they were at the podium when you came in, or the table.
Well, you wouldn't. If this board chose to allow the DDA to issue bonds, at that time, if we were to delete that line, we would have to make an amendment to the bylaws that then allowed them to have a temporary budget to cover that should any board
Well, you
fail
can-
to adopt a budget. I mean, you would
Right,
have
but
to
you
look
could
at.
amend it.
Yeah,
You could
that's what I'm
amend a
saying.
budget,
Yeah.
right? So that's why, I mean, I don't see where that last sentence of Article 9, Section 2 is necessary. I think we could strike that, and I don't see how it would hamstring the operation of the DDA. Clearly, before we get to a point where they're issuing bonds, we'd have a clear-cut understanding of what's gonna occur. And if we adopt a budget and say this is how we're gonna spend the money, and then we say, oh, well, now we wanna issue some sort of bond, or this a future body wants to issue a bond, and they need to amend the budget, I'd rather say, well, you're not spending anything till we amend the budget. That's, you know,
I
don't
guess
see
I look
it,
at
yeah.
that and I just don't want anybody to be misrepresented that you can do something when, you know,
right.
you can't.
I have no problem with the striking Article 9, Section 2, the last sentence of Section 2. The board may, however, temporarily adopt a budget in connection with the operation of any improvements which have been financed by revenue bonds or required to do so by the ordinance authorizing the revenue bonds. So, we would propose striking that. Is that, any thoughts on that?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Mr. Tominello, are you okay with that?
Amendment is fine, the way it was presented.
Okay.
And I apologize, I missed what happened for section 4. What happened?
Well, let me back up a step though. Mr. Brado, you're okay with that? Continued support? If we go back to Article 1, Section 4, we just asked Mr. Huth his opinion.
I was in the cable room, so.
Yep, and he just said, well, the board has the power provided by the act as well as the ordinance. That's all it's saying. It's kind of boilerplate, I guess.
But we've already had this discussion that our ordinance is gonna supersede that act on some items.
No,
Well,
Okay.
yes, I would disagree.
you can.
Well,
I don't know where.
The act, I believe, specifically says you can do revenue bonds.
Yes,
Our
with the
ordin- our-
approval of the township
Our
board.
ordinance says you can't.
No, it,
No, it
it says
doesn't.
you can do it with the approval of the township
Okay,
board,
with the approval of the.
which is what the act
Which
says.
is what the act says. That was the whole purpose of putting A, B, and C in there, was to satisfy residents who felt that there was a need to protect in the ordinance. All I did is, A, B, and C is literally copied and pasted from the state act. I just
Well, I
restated
don't know
it.
that.
Yeah, but I said that at the
I
time.
don't know.
We don't have that authority, but I'm happy to put it in the ordinance. It's just restating what the state law already says.
You guys like granted instead of bestowed?
I don't
I like
the word-
decree.
I don't like the word bestow.
How
I mean,
about-
to me, that connotates giving something, whereas this is really
But-
curtailing, or it's not.
Yeah, but we are, that's the way you have to look at it though, is we as the board have the authority, and we are temporarily bestowing some of that authority onto them through our ordinance and through these bylaws.
Why don't you just get
I
rid
mean-
of it and say including those by the ordinance establishing the authority? Just get rid of that word.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a word thing, it doesn't.
I don't
I
know.
mean, again, it really,
Some
does
word
it,
has
does
to
it
be
change
there,
legally anything? I don't care. You can call it granted, you can strike it, won't change a thing when we're done.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
fine.
Then I'm satisfied, leave it as it is. I mean,
Okay.
if you're asking me. As long as, we're all clear that the ordinance speaks to section 4. We have an ordinance which prohibits certain things without our approval.
Correct.
Which is the important part.
Okay? Any other proposed amendments or changes?
Um, I take it you're gonna have to make some changes in Article 3 with regards to the officers, and some of that language is gonna need to be cleaned up, because if the township, if you say later on that the township's doing all of the administrative work, some of this language will have to be cleaned up regarding the duties.
Right, well, the idea is that there's a responsibility, not unlike, say, the secretary in the zoning board of appeals. There is a secretary for the zoning board of appeals, but the point is that, here's what we want. Here's what we don't want. What we don't want is a body that, for whatever reason, and again, one of the things we talked about was that DDAs in some communities have not submitted annual reports for years, and as a result, it's caused some headaches and accountability. We don't want that. We want the records responsible and maintained by the Township Board of Trustees. It doesn't mean we're taking control over what people say at a meeting. We just want that repository to be at the township. That's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, when somebody comes, into the clerk's office or in the township offices and says, "Where's this document from the DDA?" I can go, "Here it is."
Correct.
And we have the ultimate hammer, if I remember, that if we just 4-3 vote and it's done.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate hammer.
Right.
If people don't wanna play nice. which some other DDAs did not put in their ordinance.
Right.
Right.
The other item, this Article 4, and I get it says may, but I just,
Help us out.
Article 4, Section 1, and I know it says may, and I'll read it. The Board of Directors may employ and fix the compensation of an executive director, subject to the approval of the Township Board. The executive director shall serve at the pleasure of the Board of Directors before entering blah, 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 blah.
Subject to the approval of township.
We don't
board.
need an executive director. You know, some of these guys are making 70, 80, 100 grand a year. If you go look at these DDAs, that's partly the problem that boards have with these DDAs. And I get it says may. We don't need an executive director.
Well,
Because according to the documents, we're never gonna have enough money in there for till 30, 40 years to even employ an executive director, so why even have it on there?
you know, it might be. It
Yeah,
might be.
I'm
It
sorry.
might be.
The chattering and the clapping, that's not what we need at the meeting. Please try to refrain your comments to the public comment section.
I mean,
What
I look
might-
at that, and that was part of the problem, you know, that I had, is,
No,
you know, once again.
I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna disagree with you. I think maybe we could. We could look at somehow making it some sort of. You know, I know they can do it under law, so I don't know how we can change it. I think they have the ability to hire somebody, so I don't know how we can put it in a way to say like, you know, they can contract with an employee of the township to provide executive director services or so, and so then we're controlling that person and that rate and that kind of thing. So maybe it's a creative way to find to maintain some of that control if that's something that becomes an issue. But I don't, like you said, they don't have the money to hire anybody, so.
Right, what it comes down to is this, is it possible that this downtown development authority at some point could need or want to hire someone? And the point is if the answer is it's possible, it still requires the approval of both the Board of Trustees as well as the DDA Board, number one. But to sit here and say that we're certain that 25 years from now, we know what needs to be done, I just don't think that's realistic. There are DDAs that have directors. There are DDAs that do not have
Right,
directors.
no, I understand.
Right? So to be able to say that we know that 25 years from now, this can't or shouldn't have one, I can't say that. I mean, the numbers, as we have it, realistically, the projections, as we've said all along, are very, very conservative. If you do have a genuine, legitimate business district, and you're going about the business of doing things like attracting fishing tournaments, you know, outdoor festivals, those kinds of things. I certainly have dealt with DDA directors in other communities and people who go about that business. In order to get the fishing tournaments, say in St. Clair Shores, or the fishing tournaments that have been at Metro Beach, they come in with the companies that bring those huge tournaments come in, say, this is the list of criteria we expect. You know, there's literally a financial contribution to the organization, to the you know, the organization that sponsors the fishing tournaments. You know, if we're gonna come to your town, you gotta pay us 30 grand. But the economic impact is X, Y, and Z. It's how they're structured, and there are functions for that. There are people who operate at that level in other groups and other communities, chambers and the like, so.
I think we're okay. We got a motion on the table and supported, right? I think we're good.
Well,
Yeah.
also, it does say, as everyone has mentioned, subject to approval of the
The
township board.
board, right.
Right.
So doesn't that cover us? If we don't approve it, it doesn't get done.
Yeah, as Darren said, we got the hammer.
That's the way I see it.
He can be Thor over there.
That's right.
Well, no, I mean, you always got that at the end, you just say, okay,
Yeah, that.
wanna pay someone 100 grand, that's it, done.
Yeah. All right. Further discussion, board? I'm trying to remember. I don't think we opened up the floor for public comment.
No.
All right, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Just a couple questions. My name is Justin. I live in Township. I live in the trailer park. Justin Mouton. You said in Article 8 you had parameters that you guys specifically put on this DDA. I was just wondering exactly what all of those parameters were. I can mark them down in my own little, jot them down in my own folder. And also, I might be a little confused about the members of the DDA. Some of them are 2 years, some of them are 4 years. However you guys go, you guys stagger them. I know why you guys stagger them. The only thing I don't understand is, say somebody is up, their time is up, and it's time for them to be replaced. Do they necessarily have to be replaced? Or they can be voted, can they be voted right back in for another 4-year term? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Jim Sunstock, 31698 San Juan. One of the concerns I have with this is that it says that the board of directors can elect chairperson and all these other people, vice chairperson, secretary, and treasurer. What I would like to see in there, similar to what is done at the ZBA, is to indicate that the supervisor cannot sit as chair of the DDA. And I'd like to see that in writing here. I believe that's a concentration of power, far too much for that one person. The precedent has been at the ZBA, and I'm not sure about the Planning Commission, but they do not allow a township board member to sit as chairman of the ZBA. And I suggest that that's the appropriate activity for this group too, that the township supervisor, who was apparently, he's statutorily appointed though, because I see he was not actually appointed at this special board meeting. I don't think it's proper for him to sit as chairperson of this DDA. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. There was a question first on, I think it was section 8. So
I'd be happy. It was, I think his question was concerning,
No.
financial controls and.
No, I think it
he
was,
talking this, or-
no, I think it was referring when we made reference to the ordinance. So section 8 of the ordinance, which established the Downtown Development Authority, was specifically powers of the authority. Except as specifically otherwise provided in this ordinance, the authority shall have all powers provided by law, subject to the limitations imposed by law and herein, with the 3 following things. A, the authority shall not have the power to take private property for any purpose. B, the authority shall not levy an ad valorem tax on the real and tangible personal property not exempt by law and is finally equalized in the downtown district unless specifically approved by the township board. C, the authority shall not borrow money or issue its revenue bonds or notes to finance all or part of the costs of acquiring or constructing property in connection with the implementation of a development plan in the downtown district, or to refund or refund in advance bonds or notes unless specifically approved by the township board. So those are 3 things that were added to the ordinance saying basically what the authority can, or in that case, cannot do. Yep, it's a matter of semantics. Once a term is up, I would say probably for all of our boards and commissions, a majority of them are reappointments. And in fact, in most cases, when someone stops serving, it really oftentimes isn't at the expiration of their term. So if, for example, a member is up for reappointment, the vast majority of members are reappointed. On the other side, if someone says, I'm no longer able to serve on a board, it usually isn't specifically at the end of their term, but rather at some point when life circumstances or job, career obligations, or the need to move out of town, whatever it is, might cause that person to say, I can no longer serve. So oftentimes we replace members of boards midterm, but in most cases they are reappointed. But in some cases, they're replaced with someone new too. That's the pleasure of the board. I was looking to see if there is. I thought it may have been. Apologies. The chairperson of the board shall be elected by the board. Let's see. Let me back up. An appointment to fill a vacancy on the DDA board shall be made by the chief executive officer of the municipality for the unexpired term only. Members of the board shall serve without compensation, but shall be reimbursed for actual and necessary expenses. The chairperson of the board shall be elected by the board. The rules of procedure or the bylaws of the authority may provide that a person be appointed to the board in his or her capacity as a public official, whether appointed or elected. The rules of procedure or bylaws may also provide that the public official's term shall expire upon expiration of his or her service as a public official. In addition, the public official's membership on the board expires on his or her resignation from office as a public official. There is no written part of the act that says that the supervisor cannot serve. And I
That's not
don't,
what he said. What he said was that the ZBA and planning have their own separate rules that don't allow whatever elected official
no,
to sit on there.
I was just finishing the sentence. What I'm saying is I was thinking that it may already be in the act, and that's why it isn't in the bylaws. There is nothing in the act that precludes the supervisor from serving as chair. Having said that, I can't disagree with the individual's comments. I did say when we had our meetings that I had absolutely no interest in being the chair of the DDA. You know, if it's this board's pleasure, I would have absolutely no problem saying that under Article 1, Section 2, the supervisor shall not serve in an officer position on the board of directors. If that's,
I don't care either way.
okay.
What happens when he's not the supervisor and somebody else is supervisor and they want to elect that person?
Yeah,
For him?
But
Well,
it's the
but
same
should they
rule.
be? Should they truly be
Oh,
the
it's their
chairperson?
decision, right?
Right.
Well, and I mean, you know, sort of circling back on Darren's point, they probably aren't gonna have the money to hire somebody that's an executive director. The chair's
Right.
probably gonna do a lot of this work. Knowing what goes on in the supervisor's office, there's limited time to be able to actually function as that.
True.
So it might be, some people might make the default to say like, oh, just let the supervisor do it.
That
Because, you know,
happens
they,
anyways.
no, I know, it happens in a lot of committees. No one wants to be the chief, you know,
Right.
that kind of thing. So I think it's good to say, you know
It's
what,
true.
somebody else needs to do it, so that way the work is done by somebody who has the time and
I think that's
the
reasonable.
drive.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
I think
You look
whether
at
the
it from that
supervisor's the
perspective.
chair or not, just being the
Yeah.
person that works full-time, it sort of, oh, here, you do it. You
Yeah,
do it, you
yeah,
do it.
yeah, believe me, I made it clear that I said I would chair the first two meetings because I chair meetings as the supervisor, because we did not have a chair or the opportunity to elect a chair, so I offered, but beyond that, I said I have no interest in serving. So the proposed revision to Article 1, Section 2 would be to add a sentence at the end of Section 2 which states, "The supervisor shall not serve as an officer of the Board of Directors." Continued, is that an acceptable amendment, Mr. Kamino?
Amendment is accepted?
Continued
Yes.
support, Mr. Brano. Okay. Further, so let's see, I think those were the notes that I had, so I think that's fine. Any other amendments or discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Tominello, a support by Mr. Brado to adopt the Downtown Development Authority bylaws as amended. All those in, that doesn't require, no. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, next would be a part of this. The draft plan was distributed. The actual process of adopting the draft plan is a responsibility of the Board of Trustees, but it is not the same as, but similar to the process we went through before we adopted the I think was it the ordinance establishing the DDA? And there's a posting, it has to be posted in 20 spots, mailed to everybody, there's a whole process. The Citizens Council has been tasked with the responsibility to meet as much as necessary. They'd called for 3 meetings, thinking they might only need 2, but they wanted to have 3 meetings posted and published, to meet 3 times to review this and draft a written recommendation or opinion, whatever they might choose, however they might choose to word that, but written correspondence to this body, to this Board of Trustees regarding the adoption of the draft development plan and tax increment finance plan. So we actually cannot adopt it now. We've received it. It had been reviewed. It's certainly the responsibility of this body to look it over, to ask questions or investigate. The Citizens Council has scheduled 3 meetings at 7 p.m., April 21st, April 28th, and May 21st. You'd receive that, right? The clerk notices those, and then there is a need to call for a public hearing, May 11th, per the DDA Act. And I don't know if we can just, as a board or as a body, do we just hereby say that, or do we don't have to have a motion to call for that public hearing, do we? No. But we can certainly say that at a public meeting this morning, or this evening, we're calling for a public hearing, May 11th, and then the clerk should notice that. After that public hearing, only after we publish that and basically a pretty thorough, I think there's a print ad, we have to do a mailing, we have to nail postings all over. It's probably the most thorough notification that I'm aware of. Only after that it's been noticed for a while can this board then hold the public hearing. After that public hearing, then the board has the option of taking action to adopt the plan.
By ordinance.
By ordinance, correct. And so that's a 2-step process that we would normally follow. The first step could be at the May 11th meeting, and it probably likely will be at the May 11th meeting.
Public comments.
Yep, let's see, I'm looking at the agenda, I got too many things spread out here.
Public comment.
Yep, so, good, we'll open up the floor for public comments. Public comments can be up to 5 minutes and on general in nature.
William Bardell, 18-year resident. First thing I want to say is about that cell tower over there. Just talking to people through the years, and when Mr. Forlini and his men were on the board and they bought that, Harrison Township bought that, it was 240 acres or whatever it was. Now, I understand you say it was to put homes in and so forth. My understanding was that land was going to be for a campground or for some type of a natural area over there. And I know we tried to get a match from the state for a bike path through there, which I'm all for. Now, I don't know how Mr. Forlini's gonna feel about all this and his men that bought that at the time and what the vision was. But I can tell you, my cell phone worked a lot better since they put the cell towers in on Crocker, on top of that high-rise up in there. After they put that in, my cell phone always worked. So, even though I disagree with Mr. Fortellini on his situation with the roads, his postcard, I didn't agree with Mr. Fortellini purchasing and his men purchasing that land for the township at the time. But I do disagree with Mr. Fortellini's postcard about the Proposition 15-1 for the 17% increase in the sales tax. Going from 6 to 7 is a 17% increase. Because 7 is, of course, 116.6% more than 6. 7 is 116.6% more than 6. It's going to cost every man and woman, if this tax is approved by the voters on May 5th, it's going to cost every man and woman approximately $600 a year, providing you don't buy a large appliance or a refrigerator. Now, our Republican governor, before his election, could have raised the gas tax by 6 cents. And let's say you average 40 miles a year, it would cost you $60 a year. But our governor times it by 10. He doesn't want $60 from everybody a year. He wants 600. He times it by 10. I urge everybody and their brother, everybody you know, to tell them to go out and vote no on this proposal. The insurance lobby has a catastrophic money in the bank, and they have a plan B to use the interest off that catastrophic money. Now, in a catastrophic accident, your insurance would pick up, I believe it's like $537,000. The rest would come from the catastrophic fund from Michigan. You know, if you were involved in an accident and somebody got seriously injured and needed long-term care, and so forth. But I do agree with Mr. Jack Brandenburg. I got the mailer from him that he doesn't say that he doesn't support it, but if you want to get the facts on this 17% increase in the sales tax, look at Jack Brandenburg's mailer that he's mailed to everybody. He also states at the end of his mailer that the municipalities that are going to get most of the money are going to be the truck lines, and your cities and villages are only going to get 21.8%. And keep in mind that they never lowered the weight per axle on the trucks. Keep in mind that. So I urge everyone to vote no on this. And also, I'm going to be watching that wetland over there where you guys voted to put that cell tower in over there and pillage that land. I'm going to be watching to make sure they don't drop ryegrass in there and backfill it and pillage that. That was bought by Mr. Fortellini and his crew that were here in this office for a campground or a water park or some type of recreational situation. And I think it's a sin to pillage that land. I know we got builders that got their hand in the cookie jar who want free stuff and want to cut a road through there, that want all kinds of free stuff. I'm a taxpayer. I'm not asking for nothing free. I'm asking for all of you to be stewards of this township and protect this township like it's your baby brother or your baby sister, and take it under your arm and nurture this township and care about this township. Please, thank you, and vote no on Proposition 1, May 5th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Senstock, 31698 San Juan. I've got several things to talk about, so I'll start out by saying that once again, the board just chooses to act like whatever they want to do, they can do. And unfortunately, there's 5 or 6 members that vote that way all the time. I asked to pull the expense reports out for the mileage for the Mr. Verkest and because I wanted to find out just how much we pay per mile for that gas tax and exactly what was involved with $234 and $335. I want to make sure that we are not paying to drive Mr. Verkest back and forth from his house to the supervisor's office every day. And the easiest way to do that is check the mileage and what it's for. As far as the request I made to pull out the item on the insurance company, on the $10,000, part of why I was asking that that be pulled is because I wanted to know exactly what we paid the money out for. Not just the $10,000, but the total. And how much was the total, and who was responsible. Well, there was some paperwork in the file back there, and it says that we were sued alleging violation of Whistleblowers Protection Act, false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And it was filed by Aaron Hardcastle, one of our township employees. And it costs us $115,550. Cost us, our insurance company, that amount of money, but it also cost us our insurance, which in the end ended up costing us another 50 grand in increased insurance premiums. We talked about it earlier in the meeting, $18,000 just for 2 months protection, 3 months, sorry. I want to know who was the person that was sued as part of this, so we can start assessing some blame. Because I'll tell you what, I understand there's several other lawsuits going on, and I'm going to be asking the same questions about all of those. I want to know who's causing the problems up there. I got a good idea. Lastly, I want to talk about the gas tax proposal. Lately, we